Seth Rollins to face CM Punk on the Raw debut for Netflix, what this means for WrestleMania. And Logan Paul is heading to Monday Night Raw. What two feuds can come from this move? It's time to roll around the ring. The rumors were confirmed true this past week. Seth Rollins and CM Punk will not be waiting for WrestleMania for their first match. It will be happening for the Raw debut on Netflix in Los Angeles on January 6th. And look, it makes a lot of sense. Normally, I would say, how could you not wait until WrestleMania for a feud like this? But it was supposed to happen at last year's WrestleMania. CM Punk's injury, and they started to tell that story before the injury. And now you had a whole nother year of them kind of being involved with each other, Punk being the referee last summer for Rollins' match. And then now that the fact that they're already in an angle together in November and WrestleMania is at the end of April, that's a lot of time to make us wait for a feud that we've already kind of seen started up last year for their first match. So no, you couldn't wait until all the way until WrestleMania. And specifically, what was Seth Rollins going to be doing until WrestleMania? Punk, he has his whole story with Paul Heyman and the favor that Heyman owes him and what the bloodline story could be there. Maybe a feud with Roman, maybe going for the world title with Gunther. We haven't seen that. So Punk could have been busy. Seth Rollins was the one that was going to struggle between now and WrestleMania in terms of being lost in storyline if we didn't get him into this feud with Punk right now. But what that means for WrestleMania, it doesn't mean this match can't happen for WrestleMania. Of course, a lot of people are throwing out the idea of Punk against Roman, Cody against The Rock. Look, we're seeing potentially The Rock for Monday Night Raw on Netflix to debut because, and I know a lot of people want Punk and Rollins to main event this show, but if The Rock is involved with Roman and Solo, then that match is going and should main event that show. But when it comes to WrestleMania, WrestleMania needs to be Rock versus Roman. I understand Punk and Roman, Cody and Rock, those are matches we want to see. Those are stories that are great and normally are WrestleMania caliber, but I think a lot of people are forgetting how big of a deal this Rock versus Roman match is. 2 years ago, we were clamoring for it. Last year, they wanted to do it, but of course, Cody's story got in the way. That is the only option for The Rock and Roman Reigns for this year's WrestleMania. That means The Rock and Roman Reigns will not be available for WrestleMania. Cody needs to be doing something else, and Punk needs to be doing something else. And what else for Punk to do to have his final match with Seth Rollins? We've seen trilogies from both of these guys, Seth Rollins and Cody Rhodes, CM Punk and Drew McIntyre. How does it not make sense to get a trilogy between now and WrestleMania between CM Punk and Seth Rollins, and for the final match of that trilogy to be at this year's WrestleMania? And Logan Paul is heading to Monday Night Raw. They announced that on the kickoff for Netflix for Raw. And look, it makes a lot of sense. Of course, we know how big of a deal Raw moving over to Netflix has been. I mean, they're treating the first one to debut basically as a pay-per-view, as a PLE with Roman and Solo and Punk and Rollins, and now Rhea and Liv for the women's world title. So yes, this makes a lot of sense. And there's two names that we could see involved with Logan Paul, one of which they already kind of hinted at for the kickoff on Netflix, and that's Gunther. Look, it makes a lot of sense. Triple H has already put a mid-card title on Logan Paul. He has proven to trust Logan Paul to stick around in the company enough to put him in a title picture and put him involved in the title. But this is a match that he cannot win. Gunther, the way he has been built from his NXT days to his main roster days, the way he has dominated everyone else on the roster from his IC title run to right now his world title run, dropping the title to someone like Logan Paul, who is still somewhat part-time. I mean, he hasn't been seen since dropping the title to LA Knight. We know how big of a deal he is elsewhere. I mean, he has a whole boxing match in India coming up against Conor McGregor. So look, Logan Paul is full-time in WWE to an extent. And that is someone, I don't think he can't hold the world title. I think it is a possibility in the future. I don't think he can take that title from Gunther right now. That's a bad look on Gunther. One other name for Logan Paul is, I don't mind him if he's involved in John Cena's final run in 2025. Not for WrestleMania. WrestleMania should be more of a nostalgic feel for John Cena. Maybe a Randy Orton if he's not going for Cody Rhodes. But everyone thinks John Cena match and they go straight to WrestleMania. Remember, John Cena is going to be around for the entire 2025 telling stories. This is a final run, not a final match. So this match should not and doesn't need to happen at WrestleMania, but at some point in 2025, I wouldn't be surprised and would keep the trend going of guests on Impulsive then having a story with Logan Paul and WWE. We saw that from Rey Mysterio, Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins. John Cena has already been a guest on Impulsive, already has that relationship with Logan Paul, and at some point, I expect those two to have at least one match in John Cena's final run. And how about Kevin Owens showing up for the Raw kickoff on Netflix, still holding that Winged Eagle title? I love this for Kevin Owens. I love this for also keeping that Winged Eagle title around. This adds to the heat of KO and holding that title. Of course, what that means to Cody Rhodes, having that gifted to him for one night by Triple H, what it means to be world champion for his dad, Dusty Rhodes. I mean, KO's coming out in Stardust, Goldust, Dusty Rhodes t-shirts. He's on pace to be the top heel in 2025, and this just adds to it. It gives a feel of a real AEW world champion like CM Punk. You remember that story when he came back from injury, had the spray painted X and carrying around that AEW world title. That era of CM Punk and AEW, that era of AEW Collision was probably the most exciting must-see TV era of Collision and CM Punk and AEW, because that run never got stale before it was cut short when he was no longer with the company. And KO having the same type of feel for this heel run. It also gives a feel of a 2011 Summer of Punk, CM Punk and John Cena both holding titles heading into a match. So KO and Cody Rhodes having that same type of feel, potentially both holding their titles heading into a match on the road to WrestleMania, adds to the legitimacy of what this Kevin Owens heel is about to be. And it also doesn't hurt that the last person to hold that title, Stone Cold Steve Austin, taking the title from Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 14 in 1998. We all know the history between Kevin Owens and Stone Cold Steve Austin dating back to the WrestleMania main event a couple years ago. Absolutely love everything about this for KO. And Naomi is helping Bianca Belair defend these tag titles. Look, with Jade Cargill out, this feels a lot like it's one of these two. But is it only one of them? Moving forward, a lot of people think a Naomi heel run could come out of this. Of course, we're still wondering who took Jade Cargill out before Survivor Series. I'm also trying to wonder why Bianca and Naomi aren't taking a lot of time to investigate this. They keep claiming they are, but at least on TV, they are not showing Bianca and Naomi questioning people or doing any form of investigation to actually figure out who took out Jade Cargill. Now, Naomi helping Bianca be a tag team champion, basically becoming a tag team champion out of this. I don't know how much legs there is to a Naomi heel run. We've talked about that in the past. You would get a feud with Jade and a feud with Bianca. But look, the star power of Bianca and Jade just doesn't compare to Naomi for a singles Naomi heel run to make a lot of sense out of this. But I wouldn't mind if it's both Bianca and Naomi. Naomi helped Bianca take out Jade Cargill, and we get heel tag team champions out of this. We get a heel Bianca and a heel Naomi going against babyface Jade Cargill when she gets back heading into WrestleMania. Naomi in Bianca's corner as a tag champion. They both get the heel turn that a lot of people expect from one or the other. The match needs to be Bianca versus Jade, but there's no reason why Naomi can't be involved in this too. And something on Raw that I could have gone without, Chad Gable back in a segment with Otis, and this is going to lead to another match. Says he wants to take out Alpha Academy. I thought he already did. Look, this is something that we thought Chad Gable had moved on from. He has his whole faction with the Creed brothers and Ivy Nile, and that's just something that he needs to be focused on. I don't think a lot of people care enough about Otis to see him in another legitimate storyline with somebody like Chad Gable that we want to see doing bigger things. I compare Otis to an R-Truth at this stage of his career. R-Truth is amazing. We love him. He is over as a comedy act. Nobody's trying to put a world title on R-Truth. Nobody's trying to put him in a legitimate storyline with someone that we want to see in a title picture like Chad Gable. The initial run with Chad Gable versus Otis already went a little too long. We were ready for that to be over. Chad Gable, the focus needs to be on getting the tag titles on the Creed brothers. Maybe an IC title feud with Braun Breaker. Think of the matches that those two could have. So regressing back to a story with Otis is the last thing Chad Gable needs to be doing right now. Ricochet making a lot of headlines this week, and AEW fully going in on the heel character, got little brothered by the Hurt Syndicate. And there's a lot of people, of course, ripping him for his mic skills, and rightfully so. But this is exactly what Ricochet needs. Even the whole, not joining the Hurt Syndicate just yet. That's fine. Because look, Ricochet, this is the first time we are talking about him to this extent and feeling anything toward him to this extent almost ever. I mean, he's having toilet paper rolls thrown at him on Collision at Hammerstein Ballroom, and he's playing into it, flipping off the crowd. This is exactly what Ricochet needs. Ricochet has always been insanely talented, but there was nothing behind it. There was no meaning behind it. There was no story behind it, and no one cared more about it other than, hey, yeah, he's insanely talented in the ring. And he's not great on the mic. That is very true. We know that. So we can't try to force him into a serious heel role or a serious babyface role, because that needs to include good mic skills. And if you try to push him as one or the other, it's going to be lost once he talks on the mic. But if he's having this whole arrogant, annoying route to him when it comes to being a heel, the way he's annoying the Hurt Syndicate, annoying Swerve Strickland, yeah, that's exactly. Play into it. Play into that annoyance, because people are going to be bothered when he gets a mic in front of his face. So play into that, because if you don't, you're going to bury him quickly. This is exactly the way to portray Ricochet. I don't think anyone saw it coming when he joined AEW a few months ago. I think a lot of people, myself included, thought he would just join the Hurt Syndicate and maybe get him, some legitimacy from there, the way it did for Cedric Alexander a few years back. But this is a good route for Ricochet. Even if he ends up in the Hurt Syndicate, this irritating route, he irritates a lot of people already. Play into that. I love it for him. And speaking of Ricochet, how about the Continental Classic? One thing I love about it right now is the competition within it. I don't mind Will Ospreay taking some losses this week. He took a loss to Darby Allin, who, remember, ended Full Gear trying to run down the world champion. They expect Darby Allin to be a big face for AEW in 2025. He's at all the media appearances for All in Texas and everything like that. So he's a big deal to AEW behind the scenes. And I don't mind that for that reason. Give him a good run in this tournament. And then again, Ricochet defeating Will Ospreay. We just talked about Ricochet, and everything I just said about him only makes sense if you put some wins behind him. He needs to have a good showing in this tournament. Doesn't need to win it, but him defeating Will Ospreay, it gives that real sports tournament feel. We can't just take a big name like Will Ospreay and have him sweep his way through this tournament the way the tournament's laid out. It's not like one loss knocks you out. It's a whole point system, just like the in-season tournament in basketball and everything else going on in the sports world when it comes to tournament play. It's not easy. It shouldn't be easy. So it gives that legitimacy to the tournament to see that even Will Ospreay is struggling a bit through this tournament. So I don't mind it at all, but there needs to be some consistency, because when you have a Darby Allin defeat a Will Ospreay on Dynamite, okay, it makes sense that he's getting a bit of a push because of the story going on outside the tournament. But then he turns around and loses to someone like a Claudio Castagnoli, who no one expects to be in the title picture, nor should he. That feels inconsistent, because there's not much there to be told with Claudio in this tournament. There's a lot more for Darby, and for it to happen within the same week, cheating or not, Darby Allin needed to continue to win from there. So it feels a little inconsistent, because look what they're doing with Kyle Fletcher. Fletcher defeats someone like Kazuchika Okada, and he continues to ascend to the top all the way to the finals of the tournament. That makes a lot of sense, because again, when you beat someone the caliber of Okada, you shouldn't go out and lose to someone like a Mark Briscoe, no offense, or a Commander, or whatever it may be. And that's what it felt like when they had Darby Allin beat someone the caliber of Will Ospreay, only to lose to Claudio Castagnoli. And Kris Statlander seems to be heading back to Willow Nightingale, trying to reunite with her. It was hinted at on Rampage, a little more on Collision. And look, it's the last thing that needs to happen. It's easy to say. Statlander had a great match with Willow. She has another match coming up with Mercedes Moné for the title at World's End. And she has this whole badass independent feel to her, and that's exactly how it needs to be. She's always been in someone else's shadow, like a Willow Nightingale. I questioned her going from heel quickly back to babyface when she left Stokely Hathaway. I didn't feel that was necessary. I don't think it hurts her character, but it wasn't necessary here, and it's definitely not necessary to just go backwards just because she is back to being babyface, that she needs to reunite with Willow Nightingale. Both Willow and Kris Statlander are big stars right now in the women's division that they can kind of roll onto. They don't need to be in each other's way, and them being a tag team right now is just in each other's way. Nor does another feud need to be coming out of this either, because we don't need either one of them trying to turn heel again especially Kris Statlander, who just came from being heel. Keeping these two separate are the way to go. And just because we have Statlander being a babyface again doesn't mean she needs to be with the biggest babyface in the women's division. She could easily just be a Kevin Owens, Stone Cold Steve Austin style babyface. They never pander to the crowd. They never smile the way Willow does. They want to dominate the entire division, and the fans get behind that. And I think they feel the same way with Kris Statlander and the way she has her dominant vibe to her, kind of like a Rhea Ripley, where she's still a babyface. You don't need to pair her up. This goes backwards for her to be back with Willow Nightingale. And lastly, Bandido showing up in Ring of Honor. Look, a lot of people don't like this. This after weeks and weeks of promoting him on AEW, and of course him coming back to be in a feud with Chris Jericho that doesn't really do much for many people these days. Shout out to Matt Cardona coming back only to take a loss to Jericho. But no, this makes no sense, and I'm going to go the route of needing more separation between AEW and Ring of Honor, just the way we have with WWE and NXT. And look, NXT is their own brand. They tell their stories on their own show. It doesn't necessarily carry over to the main roster too much or at all. And they kind of just feel like their own separate brand. We all know they're connected to WWE, and we have cross promotion here and there. But for the most part, the stars feel like it's their own show. They're the faces of their own show and the faces of their own brand. Where Ring of Honor right now, the way it's being treated feels like it's just for people who Tony Khan feels like doesn't deserve or doesn't have time for on AEW right now. And this is the perfect example for them to promote Bandido on AEW TV for weeks and weeks and weeks, only for him to show up in Ring of Honor. And look, Ring of Honor deserves better. The nostalgic hype around this when Tony Khan brought this back, ROH, of course, we know the names that have come out of it, and they bring it up every time they have a pay-per-view. They're their own brand. They have their own weekly shows. They have their own pay-per-views. So let them be their own brand. Treat them like their own brand so the stars down there feel like legitimate stars, and it doesn't feel like the minor leagues of AEW, which is it's a real kick down to them, knowing how AEW is looked at in the wrestling industry right now as a whole. And for Tony Khan to treat them this way, ROH deserves better. Bandido deserves better, even though he knocked himself out on that drop kick. But Bandido deserves better. If you're going to promote him on AEW TV, put him on AEW TV. And if you want him in ROH, separate the two and let him be a guy down in ROH and make him feel important down there. Because every way, even though ROH has their good pay-per-views, and it's not a knock on the names that are down there, I'm not saying they deserve this. I'm looking at the way that Tony Khan is treating that brand right now, and it just feels like those guys down there are people who Tony Khan just doesn't have time for in AEW. Roar Around the Ring is available every week. Find us on YouTube at Roar Around the Ring. I'm Justin Valentine. Merry Christmas. We'll talk to you guys very soon.